It all began with nothingness in the universe. Then Watchers came, unaware of themselves, moving on autopilot because there was no light. Oh, there's a small light, annoying the living crap out of Watchers, making them aware of their own existence. The Watchers start peeking, realizing there's a whole ass world out there with weird creatures roaming here and there. These creatures were celestials, like Aurelian Soul, a being that essentially stars and cosmos wherever he goes, covering the nothingness with something, literal death, and Bart, a musical goober. Celestial beings tried to stop these Watchers from stalking their world, but they were just too weak to do anything about it. A long while later, when mortals started to build civilizations, the most trusted members amongst them got a celestial upgrade and became ascended beings, basically the ancient world's VIP club. Over in the land of Ionia, mortals and sky giants were duking it out in an epic battle royale. It was all fun and games until the enlightened Vastians, pretty much mystical animal-human hybrids, stepped in to play peacekeeper. Meanwhile, the Watchers, who were basically the nosy neighbors of the universe, got curious about all this commotion and started poking their icy fingers into this new world through these spooky doorways called void rifts. The Celestials, who were like the universe's overachieving big brothers, noticed these rifts and decided to turn up their influence in Runeterra.
You can make a religion out of this.
Which is the name of our magical world, by the way. Remember Aurelian Soul? That giant cosmic lizard visited Mount Targan and got a taste of celebrity worship. And boy did he love it. But fame comes at a price. The mortals crafted a beautiful crown for him. Aurelian Soul never wanted to turn down the spotlight, put it on, only to realize it was a fancy cosmic leash, chaining him to Runeterra forever. This move had a double whammy effect, keeping Aurelian Soul as a reluctant bodyguard against the Watchers, who were eyeing Runeterra like it was a prime vacation spot, and using him to plug up those pesky void rifts. Good plan? Not really. Now, Runeterra had a triple threat: power-hungry Celestials, creepy Watchers, and one massive star-spitting dragon looking for some cosmic payback. The Targonians basically set themselves up for doom. Yeah, they might be cooked. So here's the deal. These void rifts were tiny and the Watchers were thick as by Gen Z standards. They couldn't squeeze through, so they hatched a plan to corrupt a mortal to be their sneaky little spy. Their master plan played out best in Freljord, a land of ice up in the north. Here, one girl, Lissandra, almost single-handedly doomed the world. Lissandra and her sisters, Avarosa and Serelda, were the power trio of Freljord, all hungry for some of that fancy celestial magic. Serelda, who had her eyes on controlling the celestial heavens, immediately got punished and ended up losing her voice. Avarosa, the peeping Tom of the group, spied on the dark and ended up deaf. And Lissandra, who thought she could mess with wild magic, got a reality check from Volibear and ended up blind. So there they were, the disabled rulers of Freljord. After getting the disability pass, Lissandra was able to hear whispers from the void. The Watchers, seizing this opportunity, whispered sweet things about immortality to her, in exchange for letting them crash at her place. And voila, the Iceborn were born, Freljordians with a pinch of void power. But when the Watchers finally showed up, they were so hideously frightening that Lissandra had a major oopsie moment. In a panic, she put the Iceman to shame, encasing the whole of Freljord and the Watchers in the Howling Abyss. Oh, and her sisters got caught up in the crossfire, so RIP. Fast forward a few decades, and multiple tiny sneaky void rifts began popping up. These were too small for our starry dragon Aurelian Soul to deal with. He might have been a cosmic force, but apparently he wasn't great with the small stuff. Enter the Shurima Empire, the ancient world's answer to modern-day engineers. They had this big idea to build a massive sun disk right in the heart of the desert to produce a ton of steroid-infused warriors. Their first try was a flop, but the second try, a resounding success. This sun disk was churning out god warriors, super warriors, and sunborns at a record speed. These pumped-up heroes were known as the Shurima Ascended. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of your favorite comic book heroes, but with more sand in their shoes. Leading this pack of desert superheroes was Azir, who was a birdman and the grand leader of Shurimans. Then there was Nasus, who ascended to become Mr. Wise Guy, and Sedaka, who turned into the deadliest thing on two legs. And voila, Shurima is now a superpower. In the land of Ikathia, a place bustling with mages, Things got real when the Empire of Shurima decided to add them to their already impressive collection of conquered lands. The Icathians, understandably, were not thrilled about this. The Emperor of Icathia, in a desperate bid to stand up to Shurima's Ascended, those superpowered sun-kissed demigods, decided to make an alliance with the Void, which at this point was just a magical cosmic force that's about as friendly as a swarm of angry bees. This led to what can only be described as an otherworldly mess. The Watchers, who were always looking for a way in, seized this opportunity. They started cooking up all sorts of twisted creatures. These abominations were so powerful, they could flip the world upside down if given the chance. They went into war, and one of the Ascended Sadaka received the Gojo treatment. Despite this setback, the Ascended managed to pull off a win. A bit of a surprise, really, considering the Watchers had been peeping at the world for ages, but still seemed underprepared. By this point, the rift in Icathia had grown into a colossal problem. In the sands of Shurima, Azir and Nasus were playing whack-a-mole with Void-influenced warriors, trying to keep them in check. Now, being a former slave and Azir's right-hand man, Xerath had some serious beef with his fellow Bird Emperor. He thought Azir did not like slaves, but little did he know, Azir was planning a grand free every slave party after he ascended. But Xerath, being impatient, decided to crash Azir's ascension ceremony, literally shoving him aside and grabbing the Sun Disk's power for himself. The world goes to Nasus, now unable to keep the Void soldiers in line, decided to go off the grid, and that's when Shurima hits its second major oopsie. As time went by, some Ascended warriors got cozy with the Void Whispers and stumbled upon blood magic, turning into what we now call Darkins. This was the era of the Darkin Rust and Aatrox. These Darkins loved war, and Shurima fell into chaos. Then comes the Celestials. They sent Zoe, their quirky moon-powered messenger, to teach the Shurimas a neat trick, how to turn Darkins into living weapons. It was basically a magical Pokemon Go. The Shurimans went on a catching spree, sealing every single Darkin into weapons. And just like that, Shurima's gotta catch 'em all phase was in full swing. After a brief chill-out period in history, we entered the Age of Man, where anyone with enough guts and muscle could try their hand at being king. No more celestial micromanagement meant it was anyone's game. Sanozal took Conqueror to a whole new level, painting Runeterra red and building an empire that was more about blood than brotherhood. Ozal had big dreams, the biggest being to become the Afterlife's VIP, the God of Death. But, plot twist, his own mages pulled a fast one on him after his demise, and let's face it, the Afterlife's social scene was pretty dead, so he was doomed from the start. But you can keep a bad guy down. Sanozal came back from hell as Mordekaiser, now with the cool party trick of chatting with the dead. He went on a medieval-style crusade, doing whatever he wanted and conquering anything and everything in the process. To put a stop to his reign of terror, the Noxian tribes had to buddy up. Just when Mordekaiser thought he had it all, his right-hand woman LeBlanc did some backstabbing, leading to his dramatic downfall. Somewhere else in the world, in the arcane vaults of Hylia, a kingdom that was probably too curious for its own good, a mystical accident shatters the barrier between the living room and the Shadow Realm or the Underworld. Now, any person with a hint of common sense would have made a run for it, but not Viego, who was crowned as the Ruin King for releasing the shadows of the Underworld to other parts of Runeterra, and in process locks up Callista, his once trusty sidekick, and throws down with the Legion of Light. Why? Because he was unable to move on from his wife's death, setting the gold standard for simps around the world. In the end, Viego was stopped by the Legion of Light, and the world went back to peace. Yeah, that didn't last long. People started getting bored, and started to find powerful stones filled with energy enough to destroy the world called world runes throughout the lands of Runeterra. Chaos and war ensued Runeterra, and even Bard, the cosmic janitor, could not calm things down. Meanwhile, two random travelers, Rise and his mentor Tyrus, were on a rune collecting spree, trying to keep these world-ending trinkets out of everyone's hands and keep Runeterra at peace. But in the end, Tyrus got greedy, leading to a showdown that ended with Rise having to take him down. At the end of his journey, he collected most of the world runes, officially ending the Rune Wars. The aftermath was not pretty. Many places in the world got wiped off the map. Remember that kingdom called Helios? Yeah, they're gone. With Helios gone, the East was left with just one big player, Noxus. These folks were the ultimate survivalists, hunkering down in the dark magic-powered immortal bastion, which once belonged to the now-deceased and aptly named Mordekaiser. Noxus popped up on the map as a symbol of the unification of the Noxi tribes. Meanwhile, out west in Demacia, they were crowning their very first king, Orlan. Demacia wasn't just any kingdom. It was designed to be an anti-magic haven and sanctuary for those still shaken from the horrors of the Rune Wars. Noxus, on the other hand, stayed true to their conquer or be conquered philosophy, proving that they were definitely not the type to back down from a fight or a chance to expand their empire. They built the Dragon Gate, which was kind of like their version of a nuclear arsenal, making them stronger and more ambitious than ever. Their goal? To bring the whole of Runeterra under one big, happy, and slightly oppressive Noxian family. Anyways, wars were last season, and the new trend now was a competition of who could build the longest trade routes. Nations were racing to beef up their economies and flex their trade muscles, but there was a catch. East and West Runeterra were separated by a massive wall of rocks, with Zon being the only gatekeeper. Here's where greed steps in. The wealthy big shots thought, why not just blast a hole through the rocks for ships? Because obviously, what could possibly go wrong with that plan? Spoiler alert, everything. Turns out, the bombs they used were, well, bombastic. They worked a little too well. The explosion was like a mega fireworks show, sinking more than half the city below ground level. But don't underestimate human silliness. It knows no bounds. The survivors, with a shrug and a sweep of the debris, just renamed the remaining city to Piltover, giving their house a new paint job after its half collapsed. Fast forward almost 15 years. A bunch of missionaries from a watery land called Buhuru decided to let some newcomers settle in. These new folks weren't exactly locals. They came from far-off places like Ishtal, Piltover, and Zon. It was a cultural potluck, but everyone were bringing their own brand of chaos. The Buhuru were crafty. They didn't want these treasure-hungry outsiders from Piltover and Zon, who were basically the Indiana Joneses of their time, to crash their party. So they gave them their own little slice of paradise. This piece of real estate later turned into Bilgewater, a port city that's less luxury cruise destination and more pirate-themed party that never ends. Bilgewater quickly became the go-to spot for anyone looking for a good time or a bad deal. It's like the Las Vegas of Runeterra, if Vegas had more pirates and less neon. And just like Vegas, what happens in Bilgewater? Well, it often ends up involving swords, sea monsters, or treasure hunts. Anyways, the world lived in harmony. Then, everything changed when the fire, Noxus, attacked. Noxus decides that life was just too boring, so they crashed the Ionia party with a full-scale invasion. Just imagine it for a second. Noxus, armed to the teeth, marching to Ionia, expecting a cakewalk. The outskirts of Ionia spreading their legs for the massive Noxian guillotine. Yet, the tunnel becomes tighter and deeper as they penetrate, and at some point, only insane resistance awaits. This resistance was fierce, with the spotlight on many heroes popped up here and there, and in the end, managed to stop Noxus' invasion. Meanwhile in Noxus, there was a bit of a power shuffle. The current Noxian general was outmaneuvered by the Swain, an ex-general who, after seeing the mess, decided it was time for a change in leadership and stage a coup to take the reins. This guy was cooking. He stopped the Ionian fiasco, and dealt with a dangerous group called the Black Rose. Despite being on a retirement plan, Swain wasn't just power-hungry, he was smart. To avoid future power trips, he slid the authority into a trio of leadership roles, creating the Noxian Triumvirate. Swain snagged the seat of vision for himself, Darius brought the might and the muscles, and then there was LeBlanc, more than 1,000 years old by now, in the seat of Guile. However, the stories aren't ending here. The lore of League of Legends is constantly expanding, and currently, we have the story of Silas, who was single-handedly f***ing Demacia, Udyr with the Signs, and the Volibear, whose legends are still being passed on. Plus, the Wind duo are also on an unending journey called the Confessions of a Broken Blade. Now, like and subscribe to find a world rune in your next bag of Cheetos.